Someone's having a bad day, Daphne said with a grin. Seconds later, Sheriff Nottingham hobbled into the room. What is it, woman? Don't you know I have my hands full? The phone is ringing off the hook. Apparently, some fool in a Civil War uniform is over on Applebee's farm firing a musket. The Grimms have come to pay their taxes again, Hart said, pointing an angry finger at the family. The sheriff nodded, but his face was dark and angry. I know. It's all there, Sheriff, and like before, I'm going to need a receipt, Granny Rhoda said. You enjoying this? Hart shouted. What? Paying taxes? I doubt there are too many people who enjoy it, Granny said. Well, you can come in here with $1,000,000 next time and it won't change the inevitable. I want you out of this town, Rhoda Grimm, you and your filthy brood. I want every human being out of Berryport Landing, and what I want, I get. Suddenly, the door flew open and one of the playing card soldiers raced inside. Sheriff, we've got a situation, he yelled. Calm yourself down, you idiot. There's a ship coming up the river, the soldier said. I just heard about it on my radio. The witnesses say it's pretty old. So what? Nottingham said. Ships come up and down the river every day. This one has cannons mounted on it, the guard said. Cannons? Rain repeated. Just then, the walkie-talkie strapped to the guard's waist squawked and a voice came on. 7 o'clock, you're not going to believe the ship. There must be 1,000 people on it, and they're all dressed like they're going to a costume party. Plus, you gotta see the storm. It just came out of nowhere. Wait a minute, I think the boat has a name painted on the side. It looks German. Neue Anfang. New beginning, Granny translated. It can't be, Mayor Hart shouted. Nottingham leaped over the counter that divided the room and pushed through the family as he raced out the door. Mayor Hart was hot on his heels. What? Sabrina cried. What's the big deal about this ship? Uncle Jake shook her head in disbelief. It's impossible. It can't be the new beginning. Mr. Canis was already out of the car and hurrying to join them when they exited the courthouse. You've heard. Granny nodded. It must be some kind of prank. It's not, Canis said. I can smell the boat. I'll never forget that smell. The family raced down the street as fast as they could. By the time they reached the tiny marina, Granny Rhoda was out of breath and there was a huge crowd of people looking out on the river. The Grimms weaved through the mob until they got to the front. There it was, a massive sailing ship with several white flags fluttering in the cool spring breeze. Even from the shore, Sabrina could see a crowd on board staring back at them. A tiny rowboat was already cruising through toward the shore with a lone man at the oars. Who is it? Daphne wondered, looking across the river. Granny reached into her huge handbag and took out a pair of binoculars. Oh dear, she said when she peered through the lenses. What? Who is it? Sabrina asked, and Granny handed her the binoculars. She adjusted them and looked out toward the ship. The deck was filled with princes, princesses, witches, ogres, dwarves, oddly dressed people, and numerous hairy and feathered creatures. She searched the water for the rowboat. A man with brown hair and a rather large nose was approaching the shore. He seemed oddly familiar, as if she had seen a picture of him before, or maybe a drawing. Then it dawned on her who it was. Children, that's your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. That's Wilhelm Grimm, Granny said. Chapter 9. Sabrina glanced at the sky. A swirling black storm, another 10 time, was rapidly vanishing from above the river. The little rowboat drifted to the shore and Wilhelm leaped out. He was shorter than Sabrina expected. He was wearing a long brown coat and a wide-brimmed hat. His eyes were almost black and quite small. He turned and gazed at the crowd with awe and wonder. Is that America? Wilhelm asked. Yeah, that is America. Welcome in, Wilhelm. Welcome in. Granny said. What did you just say? Daphne asked. I just welcomed him to America, Granny said, and turned back to Wilhelm. Do you speak English? Yeah, a little, Wilhelm said. Is this New York? Granny nodded. Wilhelm studied the crowd. He spotted Briar Rose on the shore and rushed to her, confused and excited. He took her hand, then turned back his ship. We shouldn't hear her coming. Won't she off them ship? He asked. What is he saying? Miss Rose asked. He's confused, Granny explained. How can you be here? Wilhelm turned and pointed at the ship. And there. Before anyone could explain, Nottingham pulled handcuffs from his jacket and clamped them around Wilhelm's wrists. Ask him if he understands he's under arrest. Nottingham led Wilhelm from the marina toward the town jail. Granny was at the head of a crowd demanding the man's release, while also doing her best to explain what was happening to the family's bewildered ancestor. As she left, Granny instructed Sabrina and Daphne to stay with Mr. Canis and to help make sure that no one else rowed from the New Beginning to shore or from the marina to the ship. I'm on that boat, Rose said as Uncle Jake took her hand. I was on that boat. I don't know what I mean. How did this happen? Mr. Seven asked, pushing his way through the crowd. Sabrina and Daphne looked at each other. They knew exactly how it happened. They just didn't know who or what was causing it. Apparently, the conspiratorial look wasn't lost on Mr. Canis. He snatched them both by the arm and dragged them out of earshot of the crowd. You know something, he said. Sabrina did her best to play innocent. She glanced over at Daphne, who was whipping her head around, trying to avoid the old man's eyes. I don't know what you're talking about, Sabrina mumbled. Child, this is no time for lies, Canis growled. We promised Mr. Charming that we wouldn't say anything, Daphne blurted out. Sabrina scowled. Daphne was just no good at lying. Canis bristled. I should have known he had something to do with this. You've got it wrong, Mr. Canis, Sabrina said, throwing her hands up in surrender. He's trying to help. Help who? It's going to sound crazy. Try me, the hulking man said. Sabrina looked up into his face. She saw his wolfen features clearer every day and realized he might actually understand. It's a 10th time, Sabrina said. It's been happening all over town, but this is the biggest incident yet. A 10 what? In time, things are slipping out of the future and the past. And how do you know this? Because we slipped through it ourselves, Daphne said. Yesterday, when you took us out into the forest, we didn't get lost. We got sent to the future. We went 15 years ahead, Sabrina added. How does Charming have anything to do with this? Canis asked impatiently. He was stuck there too. He'd been pulled into one of these tears right after the election, Daphne said. He'd been trying to find a way back for months. Why didn't you tell anyone? Canis asked. Charming made us promise to keep it to ourselves. We know things about the future. He thinks that we should keep them a secret so we can change things without anyone getting in the way. What is so bad about the future that needs to be changed? Canis asked. A tear rolled down Daphne's cheek. You won the future. The wolf was. Canis looked shaken but controlled himself. We're trying to change as much as we can, Sabrina said. You can't tell anyone, not even Granny. How do we stop these time tears? Canis asked. We don't know, Daphne said. We've got something that helps us find them, but I'm not very good at using it yet. We think that all those stolen magical items we've been investigating are being used together, and they're causing the tears, Sabrina explained as best she could. We know that in the future we never found the missing items. If we can locate them, we might be able to fix the tears and change the future at the same time. Just then, an enormous fiery explosion smacked into the beach, sending rock and sand in all directions. When Sabrina searched for the source of the attack, she noticed that one of the cannons on the ship had smoke coming out of it. "They're firing on us!" Sabrina exclaimed. "Of course, we just arrested their captain," Kenneth said, rushing back to the dock. "Those aren't pebbles they're throwing, you people! Get back!" Another blast rocked the beach. "Are we going to stand here and let them fire on us?" King Arthur shouted as he stepped through the crowd. "Shouldn't we fire back?" "Not if you don't want to wipe out your own existence," a saggy-jowled man said from the crowd. Serena thought at first that he was just an old man, but then she realized his wrinkled skin wasn't skin at all, but an old burlap sack. He had straw sticking out of his cuffs, and he wore an old farmer's hat on his head. "What are you talking about, Scarecrow?" Mr. Seven shouted. "That ship has clearly sailed here from the past. How and why I can't say, but I do know one thing. Many of us on that ship. Arthur, you're on that boat, but it's you from 200 years ago. If you attack that ship, you could accidentally kill yourself." "But, Scarecrow, I never can make heads or tails of anything you say," one of the three blind mice complained. "You sure the wizard gave you brains? I got a feeling he stuffed your head with cotton candy." "Oh, if you only had a brain," the Scarecrow replied. Kenneth stared at the Scarecrow. "So, are you saying that if someone from that ship was killed, it could change the present?" The Scarecrow nodded. "Absolutely." In a flash, Kenneth had the girls in his arms and was running up the street. "What are you doing?" Sabrina yelled. "Nottingham's got Wilhelm," he shouted. "If he knows what the Scarecrow knows, he will kill him." "Why would he do that?" Sabrina asked. "Because if Wilhelm were to die, then the barrier that traps us in this town would never have been created," Kenneth said, "and killing him would put an end to his descendants. Every member of your family could suddenly cease to exist." "Fudge!" Daphne whispered. Sabrina looked back at the crowd by the river. As she watched, many of the bystanders started chasing after them. It seemed that they had realized the dark opportunity Kenneth had just explained. Could you run a little faster?" she said. The jailhouse was a mob scene. There were hundreds of ever-afters outside, demanding answers. Kenneth set the girls on his huge shoulders and tossed people aside as he pushed his way into the tiny building. They found Granny at the front desk, pounding on the table and calling out for the sheriff. "Where is he?" Kenneth said, setting the girls down. "Nottingham has taken him back to the cell for interrogation," she said. "I worry about how he defines the word interrogation," Kenneth said. "We have to get him out of there." Granny nodded. Then the sheriff stepped back into the office. He had a grin on his face, like he had just gotten a bicycle for his birthday. "Sheriff Nottingham!" Granny exclaimed. "You had no right to arrest that man." "I have every right. I'm the sheriff," he said. "What is his crime?" "Let's see. He doesn't have a sailing license or a passport, and he's trying to sneak foreigners into the country." "He doesn't belong here, Nottingham," Kenneth said. Sabrina and Daphne both tugged at his sleeves, hoping to remind him that it wasn't wise to tell what he knew about the time tears. "Oh, I'm well aware that he doesn't belong here," Nottingham said. "He's come from the past. Now that I see it with my own eyes, I almost feel like apologizing for ignoring all the reports I've been getting from citizens. The phone has been ringing off the hooks for days about the Lenni Lenape Indian tribe, dinosaurs, Civil War soldiers, spacemen. Still, none of them really deserved my attention until today. It seems as if the past has opened up and delivered us a gift." "Gift? What are you talking about?" Granny demanded. "Why, with one slash of my dagger, I can end the suffering of this entire town," Nottingham replied. "If I am not mistaken, the man back in that cell is Wilhelm Grimm. Killing him gives us our freedom." "You can't just kill." That's the video. End of this video. I'll send them later. Goodbye.